Good evening, all. I'm trying something a little different based on the encouragement I've received from Atomic 67. He's encouraged me to take another look at FarmSim 17's version of Lone Oak Farms. I've kind of mentioned on some of my Galvin Valley videos that I had the privilege of working on Lone Oak Farms in my growing up years. I don't remember how many years. I think I was I think it was after the eighth grade, all through high school and most of college. So probably 7, 8 years, something like that. And when I say years, I mean summers, mainly summers, part of the spring, a little bit of the fall. Obviously, the rest of the time I would have been in school, and and in and even outside of that, my family has owned this farm. I say my family, it's a couple of my uncles, my grandparents. It's where my father grew up and lived there for many years, my entire life. And as of this recording, I'm 47. My entire life, my family has owned this, so I've been up and around the property pretty much my entire life. I can't say to know it, as well as my uncles or who live there day to day, and some of my cousins, but I've spent a lot of time there. And Atomic just he encouraged me to maybe make a series on it, take a look at it, and I may give that a try. I wanted to set up a video here to start, and honestly, I don't hardly even know where to start. When I think of Lone Oak Farms and what it's meant to me, the idea of trying to sit down and try to create some organized narrative to fully explore or explain the place, I really don't hardly know where to begin. Kind of in preparing for tonight's video, I I looked a little at Google Earth to kind of see the satellite maps. I looked at the map. I opened it up again. I looked at a whole bunch of pictures that I have, and one of them, is on the screen currently. And I don't know, it doesn't have a date on here. I have no idea when this was taken. This is the lone oak tree. It appears to be a spring picture, and it is looking east. So in the map, east kind of into the south, southeast. So in game, you could kind of see it. I guess it would look somewhat similar to here. Um, and so just looking at a number of pictures to kind of, get my mind back in it. I was telling Atomic that when the map was being produced, and maybe I speak a little bit about that. I When Bullet Bill set out to make the map, it was a huge surprise to me. Back on FSUK, there was a map thread started on the forum, and I think the question that the original poster asked was, if you could create or have a dream map, what would it be? Well, so I went in there and I left a post, and I explained that if I would ever make a map, or if I could have my dream map, it would be of the farm, that I spent a number of years working on in my growing up years, namely Lone Oak Farm. And I think I put some description in there about the map, about the family, why it was meaningful to me. Not only did I get to spend time with my family, my uncles, my grandpa before he passed away, a number of cousins, but I spent many summers there learning how to work hard, as a kid, which I think is something important for everybody to learn how to do. And I earned money so that I could go to college and get an education there that would help me in my career. And so I put a number of these things, as I recall in the post. I talked about what kind of crops they grow, And I saved all my posts off of FSUK. Maybe one of these days I can go find it and see what all I put in it. But I left this post on there, and it was just kind of a random thing because it was of interest to me. Well, Bullet Bill, as some may know, is a very talented mapper, and he lives in the UK. I believe kind of over in the Wales region, kind of on the western side of it. And I've been friends with him for a while, met him on FSUK, and we corresponded a little bit over time. And I'm still not 100% sure what motivated him to branch out and give an American map a try. But wow, I was just blown away when he contacted me and asked if he could take a stab at creating a map of the area where I kind of grew up and worked on the farm. And so kind of from that post, we worked from there. I say we, he did all the work on the map, but one of the things he asked for help to do was for someone to take on the ground reference pictures. And I think most everybody here is familiar with Google Earth. It's very handy for researching, a map that you want to do and to kind of get a feel for the area. But there's nothing like having boots on the ground to know the area thoroughly, or who can take pictures, go access the property to help get perspective, and just what it looks like, what the foliage is, what the buildings look like. And he went all out on this. He didn't make the models himself for this particular map, although now he sure could. He had some friends of his on the main farm work on all those, and I tried to provide him dimensions as best I could on the buildings and pictures inside and out and all of that. And they just did a terrific job putting it together, even though they are literally thousands of miles away from the area here. So I got to have the fun of going and visiting a farm and visiting people that I love and appreciate, and take a whole bunch of pictures of the place. And of course I got their permission for all this. I think they kind of watched this whole thing, just in amusement, wondering how someone could possibly be interested in making a map for a game. I think that maybe they had heard of Farming Simulator. I don't know how much they knew about it. I think eventually their kids maybe got it, a couple of the kids that they had on the farm. So, and then when the product was finished, of course I delivered it to them. And and some of it, I mean, they were kind of confused. I mean, they say, okay, you're going to do this, but for free? They didn't understand the concept of mods or just kind of how that whole thing worked. So it was kind of fun talking to him. And I got to say, to this day, even several years after, when I meet my uncle, he will still periodically ask me how my farm is doing and that kind of thing, if I've, got my crop in. So I don't know if he's ever even sat down with the game. I'm pretty sure I tried to sit down and show him what the map looked like at one point. Um, Anybody that knows my uncles know they're really not the computer gaming type. They do it for real, so maybe they feel that's enough farming for them. But so I was really tickled to be able to help Bullet Bill with this and just send him, oh boy, I don't know how many pictures I sent him. It was at least 1,000, maybe more, that I took of the general area, just tromping all over the property, driving around to other locations. And I know one of the times in there, he was observing the satellite map and he saw something in a field, and it was something between two fields, and he asked me, what is that? And I didn't know what it was, so I went up there again and I hoofed it out to the area on the map he was pointing at. And lo and behold, I mean, he thought maybe it was a bridge, a small bridge over a stream, and it wasn't a bridge at all. It was just a culvert pipe under some dirt. And so I took some pictures of it and sent it to him, and it was just amazing the attention of detail that Bullet Bill puts into his maps. And I think this is generally known. He's one of the upper tier mappers in the farming sim universe, and just produces outstanding quality. And there's a lot of good mappers out there, but what separates so many of them is the ability to put in details and the perspective they have when they put a map together that makes you feel like you're really there. And it's an advantage to know the area from the ground, that you can walk on it. And anybody that's looked at his Coldborough Park Farms map, for example, that's where Bullet Bill grew up. So he's tromped all over those grounds. He knows them like the back of his hand, and it shows in the map that he produced. And hopefully, as people play Lone Oak Farms, it has that same kind of feel. When I talked to him, and he would mention counting power poles, or the lines on the road that were painted on the road, that he would look. I mean, that's his attention to detail when he creates a map, that he looks at those things from the real life pictures or satellite maps and then tries to duplicate them in game. It's amazing that someone with that level of detail does it. And so, I mean, there was all kinds of fun we had along the way, and that came afterward. And some of it, I mean, just made me fall off my chair. Anybody that's played the map, when you go and buy a new field, there is a real estate sign that shows up in the field. And we'll maybe look at one in game here in a moment. And on that sign, he put a real phone number, apparently, in the area. I kind of think he looked up a realtor somewhere, and he put a phone number in there. Well, it happened to be the state of Oregon, which is where Lone Oak Farms is located, has two phone regions, if you will. The one on the west side of the state, west and kind of northwest side, is 503 prefix, and on the south and east side of the state, it's a 541 prefix. So he put a 541 number in there, which was a realtor kind of in a central Oregon, in the central Oregon region. I'm not sure exactly what town. Well, he put this on the map, and this is so funny to me. I've heard of this dynamic before. When there are movies and you see a phone number in the movie, there's apparently people out there who will try to call that phone number for whatever reason. Well, apparently the same works true in a game. They would see this phone number on these little realtor signs in game for when you buy a field, and people started calling the number. Well, come to find out, there was a real realtor office, over in Central Oregon. Like I mentioned, they were taking all these calls, and people calling them up random, asking them about Lone Oak Farm or something like that. And they did a little sleuthing on the web, and they figured out there was a game that was causing this. And I think eventually they sent a message to Bullet Bill, and I forget how many calls they said they had. Their phone was ringing off the hook with hundreds of calls from people who had enjoyed the map and and called the number. And so Bullet Bill actually made an update to the map to scrub the phone number off of there, so people no longer called this realtor, and so they wouldn't be bothered. But it's just kind of one of the funny things that happened along the way, and I was just tickled pink to be able to participate in it a little bit. And I think, as everybody knows, it came over to Farm Sim 19. I think Oxygen David in that case did the update, and that also was a stellar map, starting with the template that Bullet Bill created. So time will tell whether it goes into Farm Sim 22. And personally, I wouldn't care if it did, if someone wanted to update it, one of those guys. But we'll see. But for the moment, what um, Atomic 67 encouraged me to do was to consider doing a series on Lone Oak Farm. And like I say, I don't hardly know where to start. I've here jabbered several minutes, maybe even 15, just looking at this silly tree. So if you're still here, wonderful. I'm going to go in game. I kind of have it started here, and it's a brand new game. I'm starting from scratch. I have a number of mods in there. And honestly, I don't know how this is gonna go. I have course play in there, so I guess I'll set that up. Um, it's spring. I got seasons in there. As we know, it always starts in the spring. So let me slow the time down to actual. Let me get rid of my help menu. Um, there may be some things in here. I'm trying to remember where you change. Obviously, this is in euros. It's been a while since I've updated my game in here. Not sure why it's on euros. I'd like to move it. Here we go. I'll move it to dollars. I don't know if there's any other settings I need to fix in here at the moment. Um, vehicle volume. I don't know how loud this will be. So we'll just look at a couple things here, and I think the settings are about where I want it to be. I do like stop and go braking, so I think that's about all right. Will be a little traffic, I suppose. We'll just save the ad for the moment and go take a look at our farm. I see I got a tablet notification. I don't know that I'm going to need the ad tablet really. Um, I think that's more. See, when I played this with a group of a few guys, we played the literal stuffing out of it. If I'm to believe the server log, it said we put in collectively over 10,000 hours. I don't know if anybody else has ever played on a server. I'm just blown away by that. And frankly, I don't think it's accurate. I mean, you do the math. What that means is, a standard work year is what? 2,080 hours, is it? And 2000, I mean, into 10, that's 5 years. That seems silly. There's no way. I mean, we didn't have the game out for that long to be able to put in that kind of time. Because I go to work every day. So, but that's what the server log said. So I don't know how it tabulates all that time, but suffice it to say, we logged a lot of time on here, uh, as it's a pretty special map. At least it is to me. And there's details built into here. I'm going to show you one right now. I don't know if anybody has ever seen this or noticed. You can probably look up at this windmill here and you see Kinsey up there. Well, that's my last name. That's the last name of my family. And this is well, it's both a functional and a non-functional windmill. In the old days, windmills were used to get water out of the ground, of course. Well, I'm not sure why my grandfather has a windmill here. It's still there to this day. It's mainly a weather vane. It just shows what direction the wind is blowing. And frankly, looking at it here, it shouldn't even be operational when the tail of the windmill is kind of hanging over like that. I think it disables it. In the summer, when they would use it to see kind of what direction the wind was blowing, the tail would be 180 degrees away from the wheel of it, if you will. So picture it turning to the east 90 degrees, and then it would serve as a weather vane. But let me open oh boy, look at the ad. I have an error coming in here. I don't know what that is. Hopefully it isn't a recurring one for purposes of this episode. I'm just gonna get into flight and just take a quick flight up here. There's the lone oak tree off in the distance. I'm going to show this up here if you look at the tail. There's the family name. The actual address, I believe, is Salem, Oregon, but it's closer actually in reality to Silverton. And I'm just grateful. The people that Bola Bill worked with also created this model, as well as numerous other models. And at some point I'll show pictures, but there is an old red barn on the property. It doesn't look 100% like this, but that's pretty good, and works great for it. There is In place of a slurry pit right here, there's actually another building. There's kind of a little woodlot right here. In real life, there is no manure bunker over there. There's no a slurry pit. It's just kind of an open lot. But there is this other building over here, just a scrappy old building, barely held together with a few nails, 2x4s, and tin work, and it kind of serves to store a little hay, and they can feed out some animals in there. There's been horses out here. There's been sheep out here over the years, cattle, the bull separated from the cows, a few calves, whatever. It's been in there over the years. This building here was the old shop. You know, when I worked up in here, a fair amount of time was spent in here as we would prepare the machinery for use in the field, and so there was a fair amount of activity in here. The new shop is a larger building just to the north a little bit over there. There is, and it's still there, I believe, there's this little tiny shack right here, and it was often called the Bull Shack because there, and you don't see it here, back in the day in this little grass area here, there's a tree placed right there in your real life. But in this grassy area used to be enclosed in a wooden pole corral. And a lot of times when the bull wasn't supposed to be nosing up to the cows, to keep him separate, my grandfather would often put him in the corral here. And so he would have, you know, this little shack to go into to get out of the sun or whatever. I think at some point they tore out the corral because they don't really do much animal work there anymore. Uh, just details all the way down to the placement of that smokestack on the old shop. That is like where the door is located in it. I think it even opens in the game. And then there's this side room over here, and you probably can't go in there and see it that way, but in real life, there is a meat cutting room. There was a number of, and we've been there many, many times. You know, anytime you butchered an animal, a hog, a cow, or whatever, we could take care of it in here. You see that old rusty thing kind of on the edge of the building there. Well, I think that's something to do with a refrigeration or cooling system. Just on the other side of the wall inside there is a refrigeration unit. And so you could hang a side of beef or several sides of beef kind of in there for a while to give them some refrigerator time. And there, it wasn't anything fancy in there. There's a table, there's a meat grinder, all sorts of knives and that kind of thing, whatever you need to cut up meat. So that is pretty similar to what we had in real life. This was built out more. It used to be just a park machinery over time. In later years, you know, kind of you've noticed where you get fuel is right at the end of this building. When I was on the farm, the fuel depot, if you will, was right up here just beside this tree that I'm heading towards. Well, at some point in there, the laws changed on having buried fuel tanks, and so to avoid the repercussions of the law, if you will, to get out of complying with the regulations they would have brought out, they just made a decision and opted to remove the tanks that they had. And these were massive tanks, by the way. I don't know how many gallons they held, but what they did is they tore the tanks out of the ground, and they ended up, and at some point maybe I'll put a picture of them. They opted, Bullet Bill opted not to put them in the map, but right here between the slurry pit and kind of the edge of the barn today stands a couple of these massive fuel tanks. They've now painted them red, and they no longer hold fuel. They repurposed them to hold water so they can use them to quick fill their spraying equipment and what have you. There is a propane tank there in real life in this building over here, as I recall, and of course there's an assortment of barrels and old iron and whatnot lying around at any given time. Here's another propane tank, and there are rocks placed around it in real life, just like you see here. This building was incredibly well done, and anyone that's been inside it and played it in game, this is how it is in real life. I went inside, I took pictures. this section of it over here, that is where the windows are. It has the roll open doors. I mean, everything like you see here is exactly how it is in real life. And so it's just remarkable. They put together all those details. Just an outstanding job. I think Oxygen David is the one that did this particular model. And they have spray setting back here for where they can do some fertilizer, I believe, but a lot of their chemical they do up here. Um, they have also this other yellow building. It's full of seed bunkers, and occasionally they will park equipment in there too when it's empty. And I say seed. The Lone Oak Farm is a grass seed farm, so their primary crop that they harvest is grass seed. When I say grass seed, it's typically ryegrass. That's probably the majority of it. Occasionally, they've had bent grass. Um, and in the past, back when I worked, there's a few years they had tall fescue, and always kind of over time they've had a little bit of fine fescue, and each one of these grasses has its own purpose, of course, in the marketplace. But that is their primary crop, grass seed. Now, and maybe I should go over here. This building also is pretty much exactly as it is. There's an enclosure here. I believe that's typically where they park their combines. They can occasionally store seed in there as needed. And there is an open shed down here to park a few items of equipment. Um, there may still be an old grain bin. It's just a small bin that's at kind of right down here. Years and years ago, they had a building over here. It's not on the map, but they raised some hogs. And so they would bring in some grain and they would store it in here as they made their own feed on the farm. Now, here's where it is no longer realistic or no longer matches reality. What what Bill chose to do was to put in kind of a grain handling system. He had someone, I forget the gentleman's name, and I'm sorry about that, who made these beautiful bins and put them in there. So this is kind of the storage system. But in real life, what is actually here is none of this. There's another yellow building. It's kind of a warehouse, if you will, similar to this yellow building over here. And inside it, they have what is called a grass seed cleaner. It's got some storage for bulk seed in it. It has a whole bunch of equipment in it to clean grass seed. You know, it comes out of the field dirty, and they run it through a machine, a set of screens and whatnot that removes the impurities and makes it pure seed. And they store then the clean seed in the warehouse. And there's a loading dock. You kind of got to use your imagination. I'll maybe show some pictures at some point. A loading dock over here where they can offload the clean seed. And I believe as Bullet Bill created the map, in this area he put a silage bunker. That also isn't there in real life. To the best of my knowledge, they never did any dairy activity here. They did occasionally have a few cows, a few milk cows that they handled in the red barn over there, but they never really had a full-on dairy, so there wasn't a need for a silage pit. And I removed the silage pit, or I jammed it below the map level, I can't remember. And what I put in its place was this unit here. It's just a system that you can turn grass clippings and corn chaff from the field. If you have some, you can dump it in here, and this it was basically a mod using the fabric script, factory script, if you will, and I chose to embed it in the map so the player could get some silage out of it if that's how you wanted to play. And mainly it was on account of the fellas I was playing with. Personally, I wouldn't have put this in here, but the gentleman one of the people that I was playing with wanted to do some silage, and he was interested in this mod, so I installed it here for him. And actually, there's a number of places around the map that I've modified from what Bullet Bill had originally. Most of them are okay. I wish I would have kept some copies of the versions along the way, because there's one change in particular that I kind of regret. Over there, that red barn way in the distance, over by where the hogs are handled. I wish I would have done something a little bit different there in how I modified the map. So I'm not too happy with that. But otherwise, I can live with the rest of kind of what I did. And I kind of alluded to it a little bit ago. This area over here that was left blank, you can kind of see off in the brush over here, there's a bunch of old containers or whatnot. I mean, this is part of Bullet Bill's eye for detail. I can't say or testify that there's that exact pile sitting there in real life, but trust me, I don't care what farm you're on. There's gonna be these kinds of things lying around. That's just part of what a farm is. So attention to detail. But right there, where those are approximately, or maybe it's kind of in this dirt strip, in real life, there is another building here. I mentioned that years ago they raised hogs in there, market hogs. Some of them were over in the red barn that we looked at previously, but there still is a building down there, and obviously there's no pigs anymore. So it's more kind of a place to store old equipment. And my grandfather, when he was alive, he had a heart for some of the really old antique farm equipment. One part of which, for example, was an old time threshing machine, a stationary thresher. And so every few summers, my uncles will plant a crop of oats. That's typically what we'll do with it, and we'll drag this old equipment out to harvest it. It involves running a binder over it to bind it up. We'll put it into shocks in the field, or maybe some places call them stocks, and we'll come along with pitchforks, pick them up, put them on a bundle rack, and haul them to the threshing machine. And each bundle, one at a time, gets thrown in the threshing machine, and we sack up the oats or handle it in a wagon, kind of like how the old timers did. So as kind of just a cursory overview, I mean, when I worked on the farm, when I worked up there back in the day, this building over here didn't exist. This was all farm field. And again, I have some pictures I can show too that will give some perspective, that are top down, that will show kind of changes over time in how the Lone Oak farm looked. I mean, this is just a small family farm. I can show a picture from back in the day. It used to be years ago, there'd be these guys that would come around and they would say, "Hey, we're having a plane fly over here. We can take a picture of your place. Do you want to buy a picture?" That's kind of how they did in the old days. Maybe they still do that. So there's a number of pictures kind of like that I could show that were taken at different periods of time that would show the changes, kind of from a top-down perspective, if you will, over time. And my father, frankly, could even illuminate a lot more, because he remembers a day, for example, as I rise up in the air, kind of down in this ravine. It's called Beaver Creek. There's this pond here, and there's a little island that they put on it, and we've spent a lot of time down there. There's a house on that island. I think people have probably seen it if they played this map. But it's not a natural pond. But I mean, there always was a river that came through here. But I think back in the 1960s, Grandpa got a permit to create a pond in this area, and you can kind of see when Bullet Bill created this. I think it came through on the DEM map. The topographical relief. There's a dike on the north end of this pond, and it holds back water. And why did they do it? Well, I don't know. I guess I can't speak to Grandpa's motivation. I think they have used it over the years for a lot of irrigation and that kind of thing. But I think a lot of it is just flat out aesthetics. It was a place to take the family, place for his many boys to go fishing, to swim, and not just his boys. Obviously, he had a bunch of girls too. And it's been a huge blessing to the family, even to this day, now many decades later. I mean, there's been all kinds of family activity that's happened down here in the woods. They've now kind of in the area right by, I'll just kind of fly over this here. There's they didn't have the house on the island there back when I worked there. Matter of fact, nor did they have, you could see that walkway down there. They didn't have that either. If you wanted to get onto the island, you basically had to hop onto a boat to somehow get across, or occasionally a tree would fall across and you could walk over on that. But we didn't spend a lot of time there. I seem to recall when I was on the farm, there was once maybe that, we had a campfire over there and put up a tent or something and stayed there, but not that much while I was there. More often it was time spent just in the woods over here. And I mean, there's been weddings, there's been barbecues, there's been all kinds of good times that we've had over here. One of the threshing bees we even had in the field out here, right under the shadow of the oak tree almost. And and so it's just in an area that is very meaningful to our family just for the time that we've spent there. And hopefully everybody, I don't know who all's listening to this video, hopefully everybody has some place on the planet, that they can call home base. And honestly, I can't really call this my home base. I didn't literally grow up here, but it feels like I did for the amount of time that I spent here in my growing up years. And true to detail, I could just go on and on here, and I see I'm already up on half an hour. At some point, this area in here was logged partially, and then replanted. And, look at the details. When Bullet Bill created this map, he tried to take it right where it was. Well, if you visited it in real life today, you would notice this whole area has shorter trees. He didn't just make this up. There are a few taller trees that they didn't cut down because they wanted to kind of preserve the picnic area that we had and leave some ambiance around the pond for the fish and whatnot and the birds to be part of. But they did indeed log this particular hillside over here and they replanted. And it's a lot shorter. Of course, as I look at it now, it's getting bigger, of course, back there, and at some point they'll probably log it again. But very true to life, in terms of where this place was when Bullet Bill put it together. Oh, what to say further? And there's a lot of grass in here. It growing up, or you take these two fields. This one here east of the pond, this one over here west of the pond. They pretty much were fields of grass when I was there. I remember as a kid, occasionally, I remember seeing wheat farmed in both. They've occasionally farmed grass seed in both. I remember seeing oats one year and this one over here. Then I think that they turned into hay. But primarily, by and large, both these fields were treated as hay fields back in the day. They had a number of cattle. They only ever had a few cattle on the place. I mean, you can see all the fence posts. Beef cattle, they raised them for fattening, but most of their cattle were, oh, let's see here, off in the distance, and it's just off the west side of the map. We always called it the canyon. I don't even know how many acres they have down in there. It's almost 100% woodlands down there and a bunch of grass, and they would have, any number of cows down there. But the cattle, of course, would need hay, and a good chunk of that would come from these two fields here. So we'd do that. And maybe I'll just head back kind of over by the house a little bit. Maybe I'll comment as I fly over. This open field here in real life, there's a little tiny pond there. I know Bullet Bill talked about it. He opted not to put it in there even though it's there. You take some license. I ended up adding a horse, an animated horse, to put out in the pasture here. I think at the time, maybe when I did it, they had a couple horses roaming around out here. It seems like they've always had a horse on the property. And maybe one comment I'll make here too. I don't remember what scale Bullet Bill made the map. You know, a lot of maps based on real life locations, it is very, very hard to squeeze them in proportionate size into a 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer area. As I understand it, the buildings here are 1 to 1, true to life, as best they could, but the map itself is something like 2/3 to 1. So what ends up happening is the buildings are bigger than what the surrounding real estate they're sitting on is. So what ends up happening is in real life, you see this road that kind of comes in front of this red barn, goes in between the slurry pit, comes down alongside this little shed and heads down. That road is indeed there in real life, but in real life, it comes behind the red barn. So after wrestling with it a little bit, Bullet Bill opted to take a little poetic license and he put it in front of just to get it to fit better, which of course is just fine. So, oh yeah, I was heading over to the house. There are indeed a few trees there for a small little orchard right by the windmill. There's a massive garden. This is a this is a working farm family that lives here. One of my uncles, he has a number of children. They've all been taught to work hard, and with a large family to take care of, there's often things growing and things to take care of in the summer in a large garden. That's just what families do. And amazingly, I took a number of pictures of the house. They did what they could from the satellite map. I even drew what the inside of the house looked like. I didn't give many pictures on the inside of the house for the sake of the privacy of the family, but I at least drew the outline, and I was just amazed. When I first opened this map and I could walk inside the house, just how close to and true to real life it was. Not perfect, no, but extremely close, down to the placement of doors and whatnot. I think they relocated the kitchen in there, which is perfectly fine. But this is exactly what the house looks like from the air, all the way down to the concrete pad that they have out there, and that kind of thing. I believe inside there's even a fireplace going and that kind of thing. It's just awesome. And this building over here, it's there in real life. That's kind of where they park their cars and that kind of thing, for the home and their kids. And I look at this yard and just have so many memories. We used to play ball games in the yard, and with my cousins and the dads and the boys and the girls, playing it. And the dads were always careful when they were playing ball, but it seemed like when Grandpa would get up, he would let off a roaring one that would send it just sailing over the road over here, and that was Grandpa. But volleyball, many, many happy times with family right here in this grass, all the way up to when I was working there. Um, Many memories on this patio, just when you're working together, eating together, just many times of fun and laughter. And like I say, I say that in the hopes that everybody listening has those times, whether it's, in your growing up years, but especially currently, that you have a place you can call home with people you love and that love you in their own way. We also had our share of arguments. We had, I wouldn't say fights, but there was tough things too. You're working hard and there is stress. I'm not trying to paint a perfect picture. None of us are perfect. But at the end of the day, that's the love of a family, I believe, the way God intended it. And that's part of, I think, why this particular place on the planet is so meaningful to me, that tugs my heart. And I kind of just raise the camera here, look out. The lighting isn't the best yet, but I see that old oak tree up there. It's still standing. It was standing before I was born. It'll be standing after I'm dead. And it's just kind of a landmark that just says it all. Here it is. Here's a family. Here's where they put down their roots. Here's a very special place with people who work together, that love each other, and try to make their way in this life. So that's kind of just a little overview. I hope I haven't bored anybody too much, and it's just one little area of the map, just looking over the main farm here. And I guess I'm pointing the camera looking off towards Mount Hood. That's exactly what you would see in real life. I think Bullet Bill did an astounding job incorporating that into the map. A very clever way that he did that, because that's exactly what you see. When you visit this place, that's kind of where the mountain is off in the distance. Oh, maybe 100 miles away, I would say, hitting that peak. He put in another one down here too. I think we intended to put Jefferson. I'm not 100% sure. That's Mount Jefferson. It may be some other mountain, but he tried to even put in part of the Cascade Range on the east in there. So there's a number of other areas in the map to explore. We can probably do that in some later video, but I wanted to just kind of make a brief introduction with this one here. So I think I'll stop it here, and let me see if I can get back down to earth. Woo! All right, good. I didn't hit anything. Almost got tangled in the electric wires. But I'll call it there and wish you all a good night, and we'll see you the next time. Take care, all.